What if one rainy night changed everything? When Mark offered a stranger a ride home, he never expected to find love again. But sometimes, the universe has other plans. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more heartfelt content like this. Your support means everything. The kiss lingered between them, unexpected and electric, as rain drummed against the car roof. Mark pulled away first, his eyes wide with surprise at what he'd just done. Sarah's face remained close to his, her breath warm against his cheek, raindrops still clinging to her eyelashes. "I'm sorry," he whispered, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "I shouldn't have." "Don't apologize," Sarah said, touching his arm gently. "I wanted it too." The windshield wipers swept back and forth, marking time in the silence that followed. Outside, the world was a blur of streetlights and rain, but inside the car, something had fundamentally changed. Mark hadn't kissed anyone since Ellie died 3 years ago. He hadn't wanted to. Until now. "I should go," Sarah said, reaching for the door handle. "Thank you for the ride." "Wait," Mark said, surprising himself. "Can I see you again?" Sarah smiled, scribbling her number on a receipt from his glove compartment. "I'd like that." As she disappeared into her apartment building, Mark sat in his idling car, staring at the 7 digits that suddenly felt like the most important numbers in the world. "Dad! You're late!" Emma accused when Mark finally made it home, her 12-year-old face a perfect mirror of her mother's when she'd been annoyed. "Sorry, sweetheart. The rain made traffic terrible." He didn't mention Sarah. It felt too new, too fragile to share, even with his daughter. Mrs. Winters had to stay extra. "She made me finish all my homework." "That's probably a good thing," Mark said, hanging his wet jacket by the door. Their babysitter was a retired teacher who took Emma's education very seriously. "Did you get dinner?" Emma asked, following him into the kitchen. Mark's stomach dropped. He'd forgotten. Again. "How about pizza?" Emma rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smile. "You always forget dinner on Thursdays." As they ate pizza on the couch, watching Emma's favorite show, Mark's phone burned in his pocket. He wanted to text Sarah, but what would he say? It had been so long since he'd done this. Dating as a single dad in his late 30s felt impossible. And yet, the memory of that kiss kept returning, making his heart race like a teenager's. After Emma went to bed, Mark finally worked up the courage to text Sarah, "It was nice meeting you tonight. Maybe coffee sometime, Her response came almost immediately, "I'd love that. Tomorrow, The coffee shop was crowded, but Mark spotted Sarah immediately. She wore a simple blue dress, her dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, and Mark felt that same electric current run through him. "I wasn't sure you'd actually call," she admitted after they'd gotten their drinks and found a small table by the window. "I wasn't sure I would either," Mark said honestly. "I haven't dated since my wife died." Sarah's eyes softened. "I'm sorry. How long ago?" 3 years. Cancer. The word still felt like a stone in his throat. "We have a daughter, Emma. She's 12. Sarah nodded. "That must be hard, raising her alone. Some days are better than others. What about you? Any kids?" A shadow crossed Sarah's face. "No. I wanted them, but..." She took a sip of her coffee. "My ex-husband didn't. It was one of the reasons we divorced 2 years ago." They talked for hours, long after their coffee had gone cold. Mark learned that Sarah was a children's book illustrator who loved rainy days and hated cooking. She learned that he was an architect who couldn't sing to save his life but tried anyway when Emma requested bedtime songs. "I should go," Mark said reluctantly, checking his watch. "I promised Emma I'd take her to her friend's birthday party." Of course, Sarah said, gathering her things. This was nice. It was, Mark agreed. I'd like to see you again. Maybe dinner next time? Sarah smiled. I'd like that too. As they walked out together, Mark impulsively took her hand. It fit perfectly in his, and when she squeezed back, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, hope. Who are you texting? Emma asked, peering over Mark's shoulder as he smiled at his phone. It had been 3 weeks since that rainy night, and Mark and Sarah had been seeing each other regularly. They'd agreed to take things slowly, but Mark found himself thinking about her constantly. Just a friend, Mark said, putting his phone away. Emma gave him a skeptical look. Is it a girlfriend? Tyler's dad has a girlfriend, and he says it's gross when they kiss. Mark choked on his coffee. It's complicated, Em. That means yes, Emma said, crossing her arms. Is she nice at least? Mark considered how to answer. Yes, she's very nice. Her name is Sarah, and she draws pictures for children's books. Emma's eyes widened. Really? That's actually kind of cool. I thought you might think so, Mark said, relieved. Would you like to meet her sometime? Emma shrugged, trying to look indifferent, but Mark could see the curiosity in her eyes. I guess. If you want me to. Only if you're comfortable with it, Mark assured her. No pressure. That night, after Emma was asleep, Mark called Sarah. So, I told Emma about you today. Oh? Sarah's voice was cautious. How did she take it? Better than I expected. She's curious about you, especially your job. That's a good sign, Sarah said, relief evident in her voice. I've been worried about that. I know how protective you are of her. She's my world, Mark admitted. But I think there might be room for you in it too. The silence on the other end of the line made his heart race. Had he said too much too soon? I'd like that, Sarah finally said, her voice soft. I'd like that very much. The first meeting between Sarah and Emma was at a local park. Mark had suggested somewhere neutral, where Emma could feel comfortable and not like Sarah was invading their home. She's here, Emma said, spotting Sarah walking toward them. She's pretty. Yes, she is, Mark agreed, waving to Sarah. The initial conversation was awkward, with Emma answering Sarah's questions politely but briefly. But when Sarah mentioned she was working on illustrations for a book about a girl who could talk to animals, Emma's interest was piqued. What kind of animals? She asked. All kinds, Sarah said, pulling out her sketchbook. Want to see? As Emma leaned over to look at Sarah's drawings, Mark felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They weren't instant best friends, but it was a start. Over the next few months, Sarah became a regular presence in their lives. She joined them for movie nights and helped Emma with an art project for school. She never tried to replace Ellie, she was careful about that, but she created her own space in their family. One night, after Emma had gone to bed, Mark and Sarah sat on the couch, her head resting on his shoulder. I love you, he said quietly, the words feeling both terrifying and right. I didn't think I'd ever say that to anyone again, but I do. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes shining. I love you too. And Emma. She's warming up to you, Mark said with a smile. She told me yesterday that you're actually pretty cool for a grown-up. Sarah laughed. High praise from a 12-year-old. The highest, Mark agreed, kissing her softly. But their happiness was fragile. 6 months into their relationship, Sarah received an offer to illustrate a major book series, in London. For a year. I don't know what to do, she admitted, showing Mark the email. This is the opportunity of a lifetime, but us, Mark finished for her. They were sitting at his kitchen table, long after Emma had gone to bed. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. I can't ask you to give this up, Mark said, though the thought of her leaving made his chest ache. You've worked so hard for this. And I can't ask you to uproot Emma's life to come with me, Sarah said, tears in her eyes. She's settled here, she has friends, school. The impossible choice hung between them. Long distance for a year? Would their still new relationship survive that? Or was this where their story ended? When do they need your answer? Mark asked. By the end of the week, Sarah said, wiping away a tear. I'm sorry, Mark. I never expected this. Don't apologize, he said, taking her hand. We'll figure it out. But as the days passed, the solution seemed no clearer. Mark wanted to support Sarah's dream, but the thought of losing her after finally opening his heart again was unbearable. 3 days before her deadline, Mark was helping Emma with her homework when she looked up at him suddenly. Dad, why are you so sad lately? Did you and Sarah have a fight? Mark sighed. Emma was too perceptive sometimes. No, honey. Sarah got offered an amazing job, but it's in London. For a year. Emma's eyes widened. So she's leaving? She hasn't decided yet, Mark said. It's a big opportunity for her. Emma was quiet for a moment, chewing on her pencil. You love her, don't you? The directness of the question caught Mark off guard. I do, yes. Mom would want you to be happy, Emma said quietly. She told me that, before she got really sick. She said I should make sure you laugh sometimes. Mark felt tears prick his eyes. She said that? Emma nodded. So maybe we could go with Sarah? Just for a year? I could try a British school. Tyler says they wear uniforms, which is kind of weird, but it might be cool to have an accent. Mark stared at his daughter in amazement. You'd be willing to do that? Leave your friends, your school? Emma shrugged, trying to look casual though Mark could see the uncertainty in her eyes. It's just a year. And I could video chat with my friends. Plus, London has those red buses and the big clock tower. Big Ben, Mark corrected automatically, his mind racing. Could they really do this? It would be complicated, his job, Emma's school, their house, but not impossible. I'll think about it, he promised Emma. It's a big decision. That night, he called Sarah. What if we came with you? He asked without preamble. What? Sarah sounded shocked. Mark, you can't just. Why not? Emma suggested it, actually. We could make it work. I could take a sabbatical or work remotely. Emma could attend school there for a year. It would be an adventure. You'd do that? For me? Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. For us, Mark corrected. All 3 of us. The move wasn't easy. There were visa applications, school transfers, housing arrangements. Mark's firm agreed to let him work remotely with occasional trips back to the States for important meetings. They rented out their house to a colleague of Mark's who needed a temporary place. 3 months later, they arrived in London, jet-lagged but excited. Their rented flat was small but charming, in a neighborhood with good schools for Emma and close to the publishing house where Sarah would be working. I can't believe we're actually here, Sarah said as they stood on the tiny balcony, looking out at the city lights. Emma had already fallen asleep, exhausted from the journey. Having second thoughts? Mark asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Not one, she said, turning to face him. I'm just overwhelmed that you would do this for me. That night in the rain, Mark said, when I gave you a ride home, I never imagined we'd end up here. But I'm so glad we did. Sarah smiled, leaning up to kiss him. Me too. Their year in London was filled with challenges and discoveries. Emma struggled at first with the different school system but eventually made friends and even joined the drama club. Mark juggled time zones for work calls and missed the ease of his office back home. Sarah threw herself into her illustrations, sometimes working late into the night to meet deadlines. But there were wonderful moments too. Weekend explorations of the city, trips to the countryside, holidays in Paris and Rome. They became closer as a family, relying on each other in this new environment. 6 months into their stay, on a rare sunny day in the park, Mark got down on one knee and proposed to Sarah. Emma, who had been in on the plan, filmed the whole thing on Mark's phone, cheering when Sarah said yes through happy tears. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked later, when Emma had run ahead to get ice cream. "This isn't just because we're here, caught up in the romance of it all?" Mark shook his head. "I've been sure since that rainy night. Some things you just know." They were married in a small ceremony in London, with Emma as the maid of honor. A few friends and family members flew in for the occasion, including Mark's parents and Sarah's sister. As they danced at their reception, Mark whispered in Sarah's ear, "Thank you for getting caught in the rain that night." Sarah smiled. "Thank you for stopping to give me a ride." "Best decision I ever made," Mark said, spinning her gently. When their year in London came to an end, they faced another decision: stay or go back. Sarah had been offered a permanent position at the publishing house, but Mark's firm wanted him back in the office. "What do you want to do?" Mark asked Sarah as they sat on their balcony, watching the sunset over the city they'd come to love. "I want us to be together," she said simply. "The where doesn't matter as much." In the end, they compromised. They would return to the States, but to a new city where both Mark and Sarah had professional opportunities. Emma was excited about the move, though she insisted on keeping her British accent, which was really just saying "brilliant" a lot and pronouncing "schedule" differently. On their last night in London, as they packed the final boxes, Sarah found the receipt with her phone number that she'd given Mark that rainy night. "You kept this?" she asked, holding up the faded paper. Mark smiled. "Of course I did. It changed my life." Sarah tucked the receipt into her wallet. "Mine too." 5 years later, Mark stood in the doorway of their home, watching Sarah read a bedtime story to their 3-year-old son, James, while Emma, now 17, sat nearby texting her friends. Life wasn't perfect. They had arguments and bad days. Emma was heading into the challenging teenage years. Mark's work sometimes kept him late. Sarah occasionally struggled with deadlines. But on nights like this, Mark was overwhelmed with gratitude for that rainy evening when he'd stopped to help a stranger. How different his life would have been if he'd driven past, if he hadn't offered her a ride, if they hadn't shared that impulsive kiss. Sometimes the biggest changes in life came from the smallest moments. A rainy night. A chance meeting. A kiss that felt like coming home. As if sensing his thoughts, Sarah looked up and smiled at him across the room, her eyes full of the same love he'd seen that first night in the rain. And Mark knew, with absolute certainty, that he was exactly where he was meant to be. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more content that celebrates life's unexpected journeys. Sometimes the most beautiful beginnings start on the rainiest days.